I think if you don't make a report like this public, I don't think appropriate lessons and the right lessons are learned across the country. And I think for us, all of us, that's actually all we have left. We've lost our dear ones, and the only thing really that we want now is improvements in their name. We never want any families in our country to go through the grief and the heartbreak that we've had to go through, and the battle, the fight we've had to go through. And if you try and cover things up, if you don't release full reports, appropriate lessons are not learned, systems are not changed, people are not changed, and accountability doesn't take place. We are fighting for accountability, and part of that was getting all of this report published so every trust in the country could read it.
Emma, people watching tonight will be shocked that you were forced, as you've put it, to sign an NDA after reading this report. And, you know, Sanjay talks about a cover-up. You've talked about things being brushed under the carpet.
Yeah.
Is that what it felt like? Because the level of detail in this report, for it not to be made public,
yeah.
Is that what you thought was happening?
That is what was happening. We expected better of the NHS, but then we expected better of the police force and the criminal justice system. And I think this is evidence that they're all failing, and there is a very stark, serious need for proper change. And that comes from truth, because if you don't have the facts, then you can't address what's broken. Without going into lots of detail, because it can't be a battle about, you know, how the NHS, you know, and their press teams and senior management decided to deal with this, but it's enough to say it's shameful that we were put through this level of additional torture. And I use that word, I believe, appropriately, because the torture and the trauma that we've had to endure on top of the devastation of losing our children and father is so wrong. We shouldn't be the ones that have to fight and have our voices heard and do press conferences to address these wrongs. But we're doing it, and we will do it for as long as we need to until things change.
Calocane was known to mental health services over a 2-year period. Documentation from the contact during that period paints a picture of a man with deteriorating mental health, a man diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. He was sectioned 4 times, was known not to take his medication, masked his symptoms, and known for violence and aggression, punching a police officer in the face, breaking into a neighbour's house, frightening them so much that they jumped from a first-floor window and required surgery, and essentially holding flatmates at university hostage. Now, you knew some of this detail before this report, but the picture that's laid out there, what was it like to see those details, James? Because you have argued all along that this is the public interest, this is an issue of public safety. What was it like to see a picture of the man that killed your father?
It was frustrating that the public have not seen this picture displayed of him. As it was mentioned before in court, his defence team painted him as an upstanding citizen, a man who was going to do higher education and get a master's degree, that was smitten down by his mental health and was resistant to treatment. But this report shows it was completely the opposite. From the 4 sections under the Mental Health Act to him violently assaulting a police officer to the point where he had to be pepper sprayed, tasered to the ground, and over the next 6 days was given intramuscular medication while he was shackled by his hands and his feet because he was such a violent threat to the public. With care workers going to assess him at his home, looking for escape routes because he felt uncomfortable and felt that they were a risk to themselves.
They wouldn't visit him at home. He had to come to them because they were so frightened to go to his home.
But there were also abortive visits where they felt too scared because he was too dangerous.
There are voices there in that report, those members of the community care team highlighting the dangers. The repeated reports as well from his own family. None of this taken into account. How did that make you feel, Emma? Because there was one line of the report out of the 200 pages that jumped out to me, and it was a junior doctor. After he was first sectioned, he tried to break out the mental health ward, and the junior doctor reported that he showed no remorse for violent actions. And the quote is, "Perhaps we'll end up killing someone."
Well, the only part of that he got wrong, it wasn't someone, was it? It was 3 people, and it would have been 3 more and many more had he not eventually been stopped. Those people endangering themselves on the ground, in the community, trying to care, trying to support, were reporting their fears, their concerns, and they weren't being listened to, they weren't being addressed. And these are the people that ultimately had the decision to discharge him. The note-taking and the detail is appalling in the NHS, each discharge.
And this is why we want that accountability, because there are teams of people who look after an individual. If a team has a multidisciplinary meeting, an MDT as they call it, they are meant to plan this person's discharge into the community, and that was never done comprehensively. His risks were never assessed. As you have said, the stark facts that you presented 4 times over, we were failed. They had 4 sectioning events are very significant for any patient, and for them to not change their tack 4 times is absolutely unbelievable to us.
And Sandra, you mentioned accountability there, and your wife Sinead, Grace's mum, made an excellent point earlier in the press conference, making the point that psychiatry, mental health provision, the only branch of medicine where treatment decisions directly impact the safety of others. And we're not just talking about one mistake here, we're talking about a number of mistakes. And when we talk about accountability, because that's what the families want from this.
Partially,
but it is individuals, because so often we get these reports where big public bodies, we have public inquiries, but it is the public body. It is not the individuals, whether that be sort of the lower end of the scale, middle managers, higher up. There are no names in this report, and it's not a witch hunt. I know you're very clear on that. But at the end of the day, somebody has to be held accountable for not doing their job properly, Sandra.
I think if you don't hold people responsible, people make up systems. This is a branch of medicine that actually steps over into public safety. If I have a patient who comes in and doesn't take their diabetes medicine or high blood pressure medication, they know the consequences of that. But in psychiatry, patients can, if you don't treat them properly, they can go out, they can harm people. They murdered our children. At the end of the day, you cannot have a profession in medicine that's not held accountable for their actions, but patients have the potential to go out and murder people.
James, is the fear that without this kind of specific accountability, which we know is so lacking in so many reports and inquiries of this kind, that without that, there will simply be an apology, a promise that things will change, and things will then move on? And then it's up to families like yours to take on that responsibility to keep knocking on the doors and saying, where is the change?
Yeah, I feel without accountability, it'll just be another lesson learned, blanket apology, we'll do better, and it will happen again, and it's happened for decades. For the people of Nottingham that have friends, family, people that they know that are in the mental health trust getting help for whatever ailment they have, to imagine that they could be under the care of the same practitioner that signed him off to his GP because there was no contact with him for those months. It puts fear in there. Like, if you know what your children or what your family members are capable of, I have multiple people from Nottingham that have contacted me through social media that are going through the similar things that we are. They have a child that's in mental health care because of issues they're going through, and they're refusing to take medication and refusing to get help. If they then learn that the same doctor that signed off my father's killer into the streets is the one looking after their child or their friend or partner, how are they supposed to deal with that?
I think just one other sort of point as well is that similar to James, and I know with the Kumar family as well, that we have, we have people reaching out to us who are desperate, families who are desperate, and they have people in care, people with mental health issues in there. I've been engaging with a lady who messaged me to say, And the reason I did read the message was it said, Emma, my son's going to be the next Valdo Calocane. Can you help? And you think, my God, what do you do? But this isn't peculiar to just Nottingham. This is an entirely different part of the country.
James, as you've said, and Sandra, in your profession, I'm sure you get many people talking to you anecdotally about the struggles they have with mental health provision wherever they are in the UK. And they're asking for help. Calocane's family asked for help on multiple times. Should this be a watershed moment? Because I'm not comparing the suffering of families by any means, but they've been through something and they tried to raise the alarm and they were not listened to. Does that need to change? The voices of those closest to the mental health problem being included in the treatment, because it sounds like they were just not listened to.
Well, I think other agencies weren't listened to. I mean, at the end of the day, let's not forget when Calocane was first, as you mentioned, scared a young lady to the point where she had to jump out of a first floor window. Another agency, the police, was involved. Why didn't the police charge Valdo Calocane then? Why weren't agencies working together to get a good public safety outcome? I just think that right from 2020, when he was diagnosed, agencies did not work together. Either mental health trusts or the police at that time didn't. So things need to change, because at that time Valdo Calocane should have been charged and he would have had a police profile. But for a serious injury that someone suffered because of jumping out of a first floor window,
I think they
Calocane wasn't
surgery,
charged,
didn't they?
and they required surgery, and they weren't charged for that offence. And if Calocane had, this would have been multi-agencies looking after public safety, but they failed to charge him for that. How does the CPS in Nottingham justify that?
Given what we know now after reading this report, can we talk about diminished responsibility? The decision to allow Calocane to plead guilty due to diminished responsibility rather than facing a murder trial. Your lawyers have said that, you know, any legal route to changing that, getting a retrial or getting it to look again, those paths just aren't there. You would set a legal precedent. It's never been done before, if that were to happen. Emma, are you willing to take that on?
Yes, of course I am, because it's such a grievous wrong. Once the truth is fully uncovered, then we will cross that bridge. Absolutely, yes.
The basis of the trial was that Calocane had treatment-resistant paranoid schizophrenia, and that's why he was convicted in the way he was. We have now got 3 agencies that have published. The Care Quality Commission has said he did not have treatment-resistant paranoid schizophrenia. The Mental Health Trust have said emphatically he did not have treatment-resistant paranoid schizophrenia. And now the Trust report has confirmed he didn't have treatment-resistant paranoid schizophrenia. So if that was the basis of what the sentences were passed on, then if that basis is wrong, as families, we can't understand why that basis wouldn't be challenged by and even looked at by someone like Lord Justice Turner, who ultimately passed that sentence, because that sentence to us is not right.
No, it's wrong, and I think it's when all of this began, when we started to have our very grave concerns towards the end of 2023, we managed to secure a meeting with the then Justice Minister, Alex Chalk. And he said, and I've quoted this many times, but it's true, he said, Emma, just because it's a law, it doesn't mean that it's right, and just because it's a law, it doesn't mean it can't change. So I'll just leave it there. But I would also say one last point is that the trial by doctors, this is expert evidence that's been given.
Is that why statutory public inquiry is so important, to get this evidence looked at again in the public domain, compel people?
We've been denied access to see those reports in full from the expert witness doctors. So we need, those must be seen, they must be checked, cross-examined, and do you know what? If they were entirely correct, then so be it.
James, I want to pick up on something that you've talked about, and that is the toll that it's taken on you personally, on all the families, not just what happened to you, what happened to your families 18 months ago, but this constant battle to get answers, to to hold people to account, to get proper change, long-lasting change. How does it feel to know that the authorities, the systems in place that are meant to be there to help you do that, are the ones that failed? And now you're sitting here saying we are going to make that change, we are going to set the legal precedent, we are going to make sure that, you know, there is accountability and people do things differently. How does that feel? Because that must weigh heavy on your shoulders. I can see it with you sitting here.
It does, because I feel like none of us can really start grieving at the moment. We're still suffering, we still go through the traumatic experiences constantly through all these different inquiries and investigations, all the press and interviews. We're just reliving that time over and over and over again. And there has to be something that can take us over the line and get us to the point where we can look back and look at the memories and the good times that we've had with our family and start looking to the future and have a positive outlook.
Emma, every time I talk to you, we reflect on this. There's so much more for you all to do. You want a statutory public inquiry, we've touched on that. Nottinghamshire Police currently being investigated for their failings in this case. And you're meeting with the government next week. You don't just want to talk to ministers now. You want to talk directly to the Prime Minister, Emma.
We have to. We shouldn't be campaigners. We shouldn't be. I think it's shameful that any of us are here, that we're having to deal with this. But if we don't, no one else will. So yeah, we do. It's time. It's time now. We do want to speak to Keir Starmer, again to Wes Streeting, to the Attorney General, Home Secretary. You know, we have met them. We've met them in piecemeal, but yeah, we just need to get this done. And I think that we're focusing today on the failings with the NHS. Do not forget how grievous the failures were by Leicestershire Police and Nottinghamshire Police from 2020 up to now. All of that must be covered, and there's accountability to be had within those agencies as well.